Good afternoon and welcome to MPA 594 in week 5. My name is Jared Kachmar, and this week we are going to be looking at public service management and leadership. And we are going to select a government agency called the Corporation for National and Community Service. And we're going to look to implement a change within that agency by using 3 themes that directly relate to the organizational structure, the management, and the leadership of this agency. This is actually a personal issue for me because I work for the County of Riverside, and CNCS, as I often like to refer to it as, is the federal funder for the program that I help coordinate, and that is the Retired Senior Volunteer Program, which is a part of Senior Corps, which is managed by CNCS. So this is a accurate scenario. This is what's happening with these public administrators that work for CNCS. So these are kind of my personal changes that I'm looking to implement within this agency. The mission of CNCS is always to improve lives, strengthen communities, and foster civic engagement throughout service and volunteering. So the whole agency revolves around community service. It's a relatively small government agency. There's around 500 employees, but there are issues that are happening with these public administrators. Mainly, we're going to look at a little bit of the organizational structure of how we can change a little bit of the structure to help their overall public image. And that's what our thesis is. So the Corporation for National and Community Service can improve their public image and secure federal funding by improving their community outreach and overall organizational structure to better align with the agency's goals and values. So when we talk about community outreach, their public administrators, their officers, as they call themselves, really do not engage with their programs that are out in the community. Meaning the image of CNCS is non-existent. There is a negative public image about this agency, even though they do such great work. We always hear about AmeriCorps. You might be familiar with Senior Corps, but as far as the agency staff, the public administrators running that organization, there has been some issues lately. We saw that with the CEO who was removed, the unethical CEO, and these are appointed by the President of the United States. So we're going to look at a couple themes there. We're going to tie those in, and we'll see how this can make a change in the agency. The first change that we are going to make would be to look at the theme of organizational structure, and we are going to use Max Weber for that. And this is the first time I've introduced Weber's model on bureaucracy. So it is good. It is week 5, so we can at least, because we know the answer after listening to the lectures to any general public administration question is Wilson, Taylor, Weber. So we're going to touch on the bureaucratic principles a little bit and how this directly relates to CNCS and their process of committing a change. So from Weber, we know his bureaucracy model has a hierarchy and chain of command, which is already present with CNCS. But the issue is Weber always had a clear vision for an understood authority structure, and that is lacking with CNCS. There's not a clear division of labor, and the rules are not consistent in the decision making. So obviously, those 3 principles we need to touch on are for CNCS to implement the change, to have more clear defined roles and responsibilities for its staff. The hierarchy structure is in place, but we don't see any respect for merit. So looking at the chart there, we talk about Weber's fair evaluation and rewards when we're talking about promotions or moving up the agency ladder. And that doesn't exist with CNCS. Now, the CEO is appointed by the President of the United States, but there has been examples, and I've learned this through other officers of CNCS, where it was not a fair evaluation. People promoted that shouldn't have promoted, and that needs to change. We do have a supervision of personnel issue with CNCS, and that was another key concept with Weber because it really helps enhance the growth of any organization. That process ensures the personal act in accordance with the knowledge description that exemplifies their roles and what they should be doing. We talked about how there needs to be more of a clear career structure, and that is mainly that personnel should only be promoted on the basis of two things. And Weber would always say that it's seniority or distinguished performance within that organization. And that by doing that, by promoting on those two principles, it should enhance the level of respect for the overall hierarchy within CNCS. So by making these organizational structure changes and following Weber's bureaucracy, it should clean up the organization a little bit. Too many times I hear one officer 1 week is doing one task, let's say with Senior Corps, and then next month he's over working on AmeriCorps and his roles changed, and there's no set system for them. There is no written rules on how these public administrators should act. And it is a relatively small agency. There's around 500 employees for CNCS, but this organizational structure change is something that should be implemented. Moving on from Max Weber, we are going to look into human behavior and a motivational theory from Abraham Maslow. As you can see there, I posted Maslow's hierarchy of needs pyramid, and Maslow presented that idea that human behavior or human actions are directed towards goal attainment. And that while people had basic necessities and basic needs that they needed to have, they were always seeking a higher need in the form of that pyramid that we posted. And obviously the key for us is the growth needs section in the highest level of that pyramid, which is self-actualization or self-fulfillment. And this kind of ties in directly to CNCS. This is the Corporation for National and Community Service, and the type of public administrator that should be working for this federal agency is a selfless individual, an ethical leader who is looking to get back to his community and to give back to his nation and to answer the call of service. And that call of service came from President Kennedy back in the 60s, and it still exists today. The problem we have is that not all of our CNCS employees are motivated this way. Self-fulfillment is not why they work there. They don't care about that side of it. That's where we need to make sure this theory is implemented in this organization. It does have some flaws, but this theory can be used because of the context of the agency. The agency is all about self-fulfillment. It's all about providing, creating, let's say, food banks for people to not be hungry, or homeless shelters to get people off the streets, or we can go into theaters, school systems, anything to help our volunteers get back to their community. And the officers that should be representing this agency should be promoting this, should be motivated, should be enthused about the work that everybody else is doing. And that's where we need change. The last theme is, one could argue, the most important, especially regarding CNCS, is building and maintaining relationships. And I personally believe the best theorist for this is Mary Parker Follett. I talk about the mother of modern management a lot because I really like how she combines organizational structure with her philosophies on human behavior and the psychology of working. And I put some quotes up there, and I really like the quote where she says, "The best leaders try to train their followers themselves to become leaders. They wish to be leaders of leaders." And that is the best scenario for what needs to be implemented with CNCS. We need these leaders of this organization to be the face of the organization, and they need to be out in the public. And not just maintain relationships with the public, but with each other as well. Currently, the CNCS officer in LA might not work with the CNCS officer in Santa Barbara or Sacramento or San Francisco, etc. So they need to maintain better relationships, because when we think of CNCS or when we think of AmeriCorps, we might hear about their work that they do and Hurricane Katrina or the more recent floods in Houston and Florida. But we don't hear about the public administrator. That's the face of the agency, because they really don't build relationships. I mean, their programs might build relationships. The Retired Senior Volunteer Program has built a reputation in our community here in the Coachella Valley as seniors who really are there to serve and to give back and are reliable and accountable. And that is a great relationship to have with the community, but we don't have that right now at CNCS. So, reciprocal relationships and participation leadership, those principles really should be implemented within CNCS staff. We are going to do a brief conclusion, a brief recap here. I know I always go over the 5-minute time allotted for the presentation, so I'm going to be really brief. Not in any particular order. We are looking at building and maintaining relationships from Mary Parker Follett's theories. And when we look at motivation, we're talking about Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And that fits directly with CNCS, as we talked about, because the mission really should be a self-fulfillment mission. Those are the type of public administrators we need working for CNCS. And we also talked Max Weber and his organizational structure, his hierarchy and his let's define rules and what we want our workers to be doing. Whether that's community outreach or if we define what their tasks are, etc., as long as there is some defined rules and some defined policies and procedures. So those 3 changes could really help change the public image of CNCS. So instead of thinking about all the volunteers that give back, we can also think about the staff and how they do represent what this organization stands for. And that is the initiative to serve your community and to serve your country.